Well, hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Megan, and I'm really excited for this exciting discussion today about serial killer John Eric Armstrong. So we thank you for joining us. I'm very pleased to be here talking with longtime author and journalist B.R. Bates, and then Jerry Cliff, PhD. As we go throughout our presentation today, please feel free to enter your questions in either the chat function or the Q&A. We would love this to be an interactive discussion. So if you've got something to ask, please feel free to do so. And we'll address it either midstream or at the end. But before we get started with our discussion, I would love to introduce our wonderful presenters today. B.R. Bates is a longtime author and journalist. She's got 10 books in print and a number of ebooks and publications as well. She graduated from Michigan State University's Accredited School of Journalism with a bachelor's degree and a second major in English. And she spent 10 years in the daily newspaper industry before transitioning to the corporate world. Besides time at the Wausau Daily Herald and the Senewa News, she spent 5 years at the Detroit News, where she worked at the time of the case of Armstrong. And more recently, she's been managing websites for a federal agency while continuing her freelance writing projects. She is a Michigan native, and she also lived in Atlanta and Washington, D.C., and she's currently working on another true crime project as well. So maybe if we have got time today, she might, give us a little hint about that. We also today have Jerry Cliff with us. He is a PhD. He retired after 31 years with the Detroit Police Department in 2005 at the rank of commander. Among the positions he held during his tenure, he served with the K-9 Unit, Underwater Recovery Team, Tactical Services Team, and he was the commanding officer of the Violent Crimes Section and the Special Investigations Section, consisting of Armed Robbery Unit, Sex Crimes Unit, Child Abuse, Domestic Violence, Commercial Auto Theft, Cyber Crimes Units, and Financial Crimes Units. During his career, he also served as the officer in charge of the Training and Compliance Section of the Civil Rights Integrity Bureau of the Detroit Police Department, and that was a unit established with 2 U.S. Department Justice consent decrees. So we are thrilled to have you both with us today. And you guys both, Jerry, you actually worked on the case of John Eric Armstrong. Billy Ray, you were the journalist who was investigating it and just did a tremendous amount of research into it. So it's really exciting that we get to kind of get the eyewitness sorts of accounts. So before we jump into some of the nitty-gritties, can you give us just an overall summary of who this guy was, what he did, kind of what his crime scoped?
Sure. Yeah. John Eric Armstrong was convicted in Detroit for killing several people. He is known to have killed 5 females in Detroit who were engaged in prostitution. And he is also known to have assaulted 5 others who did survive. But police also believe that he killed several others around the globe. He was in the Navy in the 1990s, from 1992 or 1993 till about 1999 when he was released. And at the time of his arrest in Detroit, he confessed to all these other killings in other places around the world when he was traveling with the Navy aboard the USS Nimitz. And so that's an intriguing part of this case, is that we don't really know for sure if the confessions that he made to all of these other killings in the 1990s are true. Authorities have not really corroborated any of those except for one, the last one in 1998, it would have been in Virginia. They did pair that with an actual murder. So that's an interesting element of this case. We don't know how many people he killed. We don't know his real reach. We only know about the ones in Detroit, but yes, in a snapshot, that's it.
Sure. And Jerry, how did you find yourself working on this case?
Well, I had just recently been promoted to the rank of inspector, which in Detroit is like captain would be in another department. I was given command of the violent crime section, which is a multi-agency, multi-jurisdictional task force. We had Detroit police officers, Wayne County sheriff's officers, we had Michigan state troopers, we had FBI agents, we had an IRS agent, state attorney general investigator. I mean, it was a a large organization. It was created a few years before that, specifically so that we would have no borders when it came to investigating high profile cases. And that's what the chief always gave us. High profile cases. When homicide couldn't handle it, he sent it to violent crimes. When armed robbery couldn't handle it, he'd send it to violent crimes. That was our job. I had been there 2 months as the commanding officer, and this case came across our desk. It was a Monday morning. We were in a briefing with the deputy chief of criminal investigations division, all of the department heads, myself, the officer in charge of homicide, the officer in charge of special investigations, and we were having our Monday morning briefing. The phone started to ring. The homicide commander picked it up, answered it, told the boss, we got a homicide out on the west side. I'll get to it when we're done. I got crews going out. That was kind of normal. I mean, it's Detroit. About a minute and a half later, he got another phone call, and he said to the boss, he said, "I think we all better go. There's 3 of them, and maybe more." And so the meeting was obviously adjourned. We all got our clothes, got our coats on and our boots and all the stuff we knew we were going to need to wear a suit and at a crime scene. And we all went out to the scene where the bodies were being discovered. And from there, things just got kind of from bad to worse. We realized when we saw the 3 that were present that we had a serial killer. That's the standard for serial murder or for serial crime is 3 that were obviously or that appear to have been committed by the same person. Because we had FBI agents already assigned to our violent crime section, the balloons went up all over the place. They were calling the federal center, the state trooper, the state police lieutenant that was with us was calling the Capitol. Everybody was being notified. Detroit had a serial, and we hadn't had that many serials in Detroit. We're famous for a lot of things, but serial murder isn't one of them. There was only one that, in my recollection, prior to that, so it was a big deal. We kind of went into action, and we did the thing that we normally do, and within about 2 days, we had the guy in custody. My co-author was telling me she was kind of disappointed at how small a portion the investigation appeared to play in this overall thing. I told her there was hundreds of police officers doing hundreds of different things all at the same time to bring this guy into custody in about 48 hours. So it was my first big case as commanding officer of the violent crime section, but not my last. So
yeah, and something about the time frame, the discovery of the railroad tracks happened on April 10th, 2000 with the 3 females who were discovered there. And then he was in custody on April 12th. So it was a very short time frame between the railroad tracks discovery and the arrest. But it's an important point to make that your job, Jerry, was not done at that point, because you all were still working on the case, making sure that there was going to be a conviction for this guy too. And so there was still a team of people working on this for months afterward.
Well, and the team grew actually when we realized who we had and what his background was. When he started talking, and he told us that he had been on a U.S. naval warship, and that to the best of his recollection, unquote, he killed about 10 other women in his travels all over the world. Wherever they put into port, he would go for liberty, do his thing, and then come back, get back on the ship. And when the ship left, it was almost the perfect crime. In fact, Billy, I think You can probably recall better all of the different TV shows and series that were either based on or actually recreated this case. I think Jag was one of them.
Yeah,
The
there were some
District.
influences, definitely. This did make national news when all of this happened. When he was arrested in 2000, it made national news because of the international scope. You know, you had confessions in Singapore and Hong Kong and Hawaii and Washington State and Virginia. So yeah, with that kind of scope, it did make the national news. And I think it influenced a few storylines on some of those cop dramas.
I think I remember NCIS having a series on Port to Port
Yes.
Killer.
Yes, because it was the Navy angle, you know, and that was interesting. I think people have found that interesting that he was traveling, and you know, and a lot of these places, I think we just touched on it a moment ago too. He could have committed. I mean, if we are to assume that all these international confessions are to be believed, he could have killed people in places where if a dead prostitute shows up, it's not really investigated. And so that's part of the question around these other confessions that he made when he was arrested is, okay, did they really happen? Well, yeah, they certainly could have, because they don't go about their investigations of murders like we do over here necessarily. So that's one important point to consider.
So Jerry, it sounds like the case really kind of fell into your lap. Billy Ray, how did you find yourself involved in this investigation and in digging into all this research?
Yeah, I've been a writer for a long time, and I've written things in a whole different genre. This true crime is definitely brand new for me and a very large departure from anything else that I've written, although I do have a journalism background. And I just found myself being really drawn into the true crime documentaries like Forensic Files and Dateline NBC. Several years ago, I started watching a lot of those kind of shows. And I was having a conversation with a mutual friend that Jerry and I have. And I had not met or heard of Jerry at that point, but he was telling me about this case that his friend Jerry had worked in Detroit while with the violent crime section. It was about a serial killer who was operating in Detroit in 1999 and 2000. And I couldn't remember the case, even though I was working at the Detroit News at the time and I read every word of the paper every day. I actually did not remember the case being in the news, which was very strange. But the more we got to talking about it, the more I thought, wow, that is so interesting. And he said that his friend Jerry had always wanted to write a book about it. And he had copied notes and files and everything, but just never had the time to write the book. And was always feeling like this was a case that really needed a book written about it, a case that would really lend itself to that kind of treatment. And so I thought about it. It kind of haunted me for a few months afterwards. I thought, is that crazy? Should I take on a project like that? That is so different. And the more I thought about it, the more it just nagged at me and would not go away. And so finally I told our friend, I said, can I talk to that guy? Can I find out more about this? I'm actually thinking about this. And so he connected Jerry and I, and we had a long conversation about it. And that's what really kicked off the project. Is this was Jerry's idea from the beginning, having worked the case.
So as you started getting into this, after you'd had your initial conversation with Jerry and you decided, yes, this is something that I'm going to take on, I'm going to really get my hands dirty and get into this. What was the most challenging part of the research for you?
Oh my goodness. Definitely the most challenging. You know, I had just reading the headlines, just going online, because that's how I started out. I just tried to consume every news story and every mention online that I could of it, you know, copied all that stuff over and read it just to become acquainted with the coverage of the case. And then from there went to requesting the files with the Detroit police and the Dearborn Heights police, all the FOIA requests for autopsy records and all of that, the official files. But as I dug in, you know, I had 5 females who had lost their lives. And I started out with, I think, what was a very lofty goal of wanting to do a chapter about each one of these 5 females. I thought, I'm going to start out chronologically. I'm going to start with the first one who was killed. I'm going to tell her story. Then I'm going to tell the details that he included in his confession around the actual crime. Then I'm going to go to the second female. I'm going to tell her story. I'm going to talk about her life. I'm going to talk about her siblings and where she grew up and what she liked to do. Did she like animals? What was her favorite color? Anything. Did she play sports? I wanted to create a life out of each one of these females who had been a headline, a name in a paper, who people only knew as a prostitute. And so that was the challenge, is that back in 1999 and 2000, these females lived really off the grid. A lot of us weren't even online probably at that point yet. And our lives could be lived off the internet, not like nowadays where every moment of our lives is chronicled on the internet. These ladies, especially living out in the streets, they might have a phone, maybe not, but they're not on some website somewhere. They don't have an online footprint. And so researching them and trying to find family members, friends, neighbors, cousins, anybody who knew them was definitely the biggest challenge. And I had to dig and dig and dig and dig and dig for a long time. I had to put out little requests and feelers everywhere. And sometimes it would take months for those to percolate and actually come to some kind of response. I sent out a lot of messages and emails that did not get a response. I called hundreds of phone numbers that were disconnected. That was the most challenging part. But in the end, I did get somebody for each of the five, even though the final victim, number 5, who was just a teenage runaway, a young girl from Chicago, I couldn't get any of her family. I couldn't. That was the most challenging one of all. I kind of got the mom of someone who knew her boyfriend, if you can believe it, who had laid eyes on her once and could somewhat speak for her. But wow, what a challenge. And so I think that brings up so many issues from a sociological standpoint. That raises a lot of questions that I think we need to think about in all of this. Is not so much the crimes. The crimes are the focus of our research, but why on earth were these girls out there in the first place? That is something very important I think we need to think about.
Yeah, definitely. And Jerry, you were coming at this from a completely different angle, because rather than kind of trying to come from like kind of a finished product and then trying to reconstruct, here you had the result. And so what, during the investigation for you, were there any particular challenges for this case?
The biggest challenge that I think we faced was tying up all the loose ends for all of the confessions that he gave us. Once we got him talking, he was freely admitting to all of the women that he could remember having killed in foreign countries. And I mean, just conversationally discussing what he did, how he did it, and I felt about it, and it was interesting to listen to him, if you could keep from having the normal human reaction. But it was also interesting to me, being in the law enforcement field, to find that, see, because he was in the Navy, and because we were a multi-jurisdictional task force with federal ties, we immediately had an NCIS agent assigned into our task force. They sent somebody, I don't know where he came from, so I know we don't have a naval base in Detroit, and they sent an NCIS agent right to Detroit. We put him in an office with the rest of our task force, and he worked through the after arrest, which went on for weeks. And that was involving the U.S. State Department reaching out to these foreign entities, law enforcement agencies, and trying to track down the scenarios by scenario. We would have to give them his narration of what he remembered having done, approximately where he remembered having done it, and then ask them to research in their files and try and find a case that matched it. My largest I guess you'd say surprise, was that it really didn't amount to a hill of beans to most of them. Like Billy said, apparently, killing hookers in some of these countries doesn't amount to much of an offense, and they really didn't think too much of what we were doing. So we didn't get a lot of aid and assistance. Um, Even the one that we were able to conclusively prove that he did in Virginia when he was discharged, um, they didn't want anything to do with it either. And I think that had to do with dollars and cents. They have the capital punishment in that state. Capital punishment usually takes about 20 years with repeated appeals, usually all on the taxpayer's dollar. And we had him for 5 premeditated murders. He was never going to get out of jail, and their attitude seemed to be, not official attitude, but I kind of got the gist of their thinking was, hey, you guys got him, and he's not going to ever walk the street again, so why should we bother? So that part of it really surprised me, I think, more than anything else, was the the attitude of the other agencies that were involved, that should have felt like I felt our bosses felt. I mean, these were 5 human beings that had a right to continue living, no matter what their, choices in life happen to be. Nobody had the right to take their life away from them, and we were gonna find out who killed them, and that attitude didn't seem to transfer over in a lot of cases. That surprised me more than anything.
Yeah, I remember seeing, I had completed a FOIA request for the NCIS files from the case, and it had progress notes. And so this NCIS team or individual went to each of the jurisdictions, for instance, Singapore or Hong Kong, and it would have a note, okay, contacted so-and-so in the such and such agency in Hong Kong. And he reported back to me the next day, nope, we don't have any killings that fit that. They would send him the details, because, Armstrong would be pretty detailed in his confessions. He would even talk about what they were wearing. And they say that serial killers do hang on to those details. They say that they like to relive their crimes. And so they are going to remember what they were wearing and what they looked like and things like that. And so he has a pretty good level of detail in his confessions. And so the NCIS person was sending that information, the time frame that he recalled, everything. And nope, we don't have anything that, no, haven't heard anything, every time. And it's like, I just don't know that they really looked well enough. You really have to wonder that.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring up kind of the psychology of a serial killer. In your digging, what did you find were some of your biggest takeaways about the psychology of human beings, and maybe of this particular individual?
Wow. Yeah, that is $1 million question. That is $1 million question of why any of this happened. And that is the most difficult question at all, but the most fascinating one. And I think the one that really, would hopefully inspire somebody to dig into the details of this case, because some serial killers, I'm reading a book right now by FBI profiler John Douglas, and he talks a lot about certain traits that he's learned about serial killers and all of his mountain of research that he's done over the years. He's interviewed people in prison who've been convicted serial killers. And he talks about the markers. We all probably have heard about the markers, things like when they're a kid, bedwetting, starting fires, torturing animals, things like that. There's nothing like that we really can find in Armstrong's background. In fact, if you talk to his family members, I think you'll hear that it was very normal background. And he was known in his adulthood, especially living in Michigan leading up to his arrest in 2000, by anybody who worked with him or who knew him, neighbors down the street. He was just this innocent looking guy, this really nice guy. You would never think this of him. He just, people, I talked to one gal who worked with him at a retail store in Dearborn Heights, and she would get a ride to work from him. She would be sitting in the seat, the passenger side seat of his Jeep where he had killed people. She was sitting in that seat riding to and from work with him. And when she heard on the news, the TV news covered his arrest, she was getting ready in the morning, like in her kitchen or whatever, and she heard it on the news and she just about passed out, but she like doubled over crying because she honestly could not believe that just can't be this person. And so when you look at factors like that around Armstrong, it really is $1 million question. You really just cannot ascertain why on earth did he kill. And so I'm hoping that we've presented enough details around his life that can be the challenge, that can be the learning experience. I'm really envisioning a student in psychology or a student in law enforcement reading through this and digging into the details and forming their own conclusions. And I would love to hear the theories. Honestly, it's like I present it because I want to hear the theories, and I love the idea of the curriculum aspect of it, that it is a learning. And of course, in all of this, we learn more about human beings. We learn a little bit more, even though it's a huge mystery, we still learn a little bit more about human beings.
Yeah. What's
Billy
that?
Ray, you go ahead.
Oh yeah, go right ahead. Because you spoke with him personally. You questioned him.
I was just going to point out something to Billy Ray. She was talking about all the prior markers that didn't seem to exist in Armstrong's background, but I remember the one thing that, and I'm not sure if Billy Ray told me this story or if it was something one of our investigators found out through his interrogation interview, that he used to have a dream, was it, about the death of his infant brother.
Oh yeah. Okay. That's a good thing to bring up because he had a baby brother. He was born and raised in North Carolina, and he had a baby brother who he loved and adored. And his mom has talked about that in interviews with the media, that the baby brother died in the crib, and Armstrong was devastated by that. And we know there's something there. There also was a detail or two that did not go into our book. So we'll just leave it at that. But it's interesting because there are things like that, and they say, childhood trauma. Okay, look at traumatic events. Well, losing a baby brother is very much a traumatic event. During his trials, he had alleged abuse by his biological father. I don't necessarily believe that. And there are reasons. I talked to someone else who presents the other side of the story in that I really have reason to doubt that. So I don't know. It's just, it's a mystery, and it's a very fascinating one.
Definitely. Kind of along the lines of things he said that maybe were true, maybe were not true. We have a question in the Q&A. Is it possible that he liked to embellish what he had done, like some serial killers such as Henry Lee Lucas, who liked to inflate their body count to give themselves more of a name?
Yes, I will say that I've listened to the recording. Before the discovery of the 3 victims in Detroit, there was the first victim, number 1, Monica Johnson. She was found in Detroit in December 1999. Number 2, Wendy Jordan. She was discovered in Dearborn Heights, just a block or 2 from where Armstrong was living at the time, which is a crazy detail of this case. He killed her in Detroit on Warren Avenue, drove almost all the way home, was very close to home when he dumped Wendy over a bridge into the river. So we have Dearborn Heights and Detroit, and I'm sorry, this is about embellishing. Okay, I just totally lost my train of thought with that, but embellishing that. Okay, yes, I knew. Okay, I'm back now. I listened to the recording of Dearborn Heights questioning him. And that recording, it's like a little over an hour long. And as Dearborn Heights police, they're talking to him about, he claimed to find the body of Wendy Jordan. He he had dumped her, and then the next day he went to work and he claimed to be sick, and he got off early from work and he was driving home again, and he pulled over at the same bridge where he had left Wendy. He looked over and he pretended he found her body. Well, Dearborn Heights police right away thought there was something fishy about all of that. They questioned him extensively that day at the station. And so this is where I was going with that, is that I listened to the recording, and all through it, lie after lie after lie that we know are lies now. I mean, beyond the big lie of, okay, I just found this gal, I don't know who she is. No, I wasn't with her. No, I've never seen her before. No, and just even details about his family that we know now were lies. And so he was able to lie through the whole thing. And we know that he's lied at other times. So back to the question, thank you for the question in the chat. Yes, it's entirely possible that when he got arrested in April, he was just talking. And oh yeah, there was one in Singapore, and yeah, there was one in Hong Kong, and maybe making up details. We do have to consider that possibility that all of this was fabricated. Yes, we know he killed 5 in Detroit. We know he assaulted 5 others, but as far as the others, yeah, they do. Serial killers do sometimes inflate their body count.
Well, we know that the one in Virginia is proven. The evidence that they had involved, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think that it involved physical evidence from his Jeep tire, where he had raped and strangled the victim, and then in leaving the scene, he had run over her body with the vehicle that he was driving when he got back to Detroit. So they could have convicted him based on the evidence, but chose not to.
Yeah, the Virginia one is the most chilling because, you know, he's arrested in April. He gives this detailed account of this incident in Virginia, and he does talk about, okay, she's in the passenger seat, and he opens the door and he pushes her body out, and then he said, I went to back up and leave, and I felt a bump, and he realized he had hit her with his Jeep. So he's giving this image like, okay, I'm backing out in this parking lot and I'm pulling away. And then, of course, you know, the investigation starts of these other confessions, and the Norfolk police are contacted, and they say, you know, we have somebody from around that time frame. Let me send you the case file. And in the case file, there is a drawing of where she was found in the parking lot, this victim, where the body was, and there are blood stains on the pavement that are marked on the drawing, and you can see where the car was sitting there, and it backed out and it left because of where the blood stains are. It's absolutely chilling that, yeah, wow.
So some of them could have been embellishment, but we know for a fact 6 of them were real.
Sure.
Yeah, the Virginia case is actually included in the NCIS files as one of his victims. In the list of the 5 from Detroit, the Virginia victim is actually listed there too.
Yeah. So speaking of like some of his crimes that he committed, Jerry, you actually you questioned John, right? What did you find were some of the biggest differences from this guy and other serial killers that you had dealt with either since then or perhaps prior to then? What were your conclusions there?
Well, I've never dealt with another serial killer, fortunately. I've dealt with serial rapists, serial bank robbers, but he's the only serial killer that I've actually had any direct contact with. And the very short period of time that I spent talking to him face to face didn't involve a whole lot of fact finding or digging for you know, incriminating statements. My detectives handled that. It was such a brief encounter. I would listen in on the interrogations, and at one point after several hours, you know, he was getting very, very comfortable talking to my detectives, and that's the way it should be. Very conversational about things. And we wanted to be sure that we didn't make any mistakes that would mess up the case. So they would ask him, John, are you hungry? You need something to eat? You want something to drink? And we would send out for food. We ordered him a burger and fries and a big soft drink so that he wasn't inordinately stressed while he was giving us all this information. And he was very, very friendly with the two primary investigators that ultimately drew all this information out of him. And occasionally one of us would step in and ask a question that we thought that, might have been overlooked. And one of the things that it aroused my curiosity to the extent that I decided to exercise my, rank as its privilege. So I stepped in and I says, can I ask a question? And he says, sure. I says, well, John, there were 3 victims out there at the railroad tracks where we found these ladies. I said, and they were in varying states of decomposition. One looked like she'd been there for over a month, one for a couple of weeks, and one no more than a day or so. What prompts you to move from one to the other? And he said, quite honestly, he says, when they begin to smell too bad and I can't get in the house without my wife noticing, because he was actually engaging in relations with these women's corpses. And that's an answer that'll stick with me for the rest of my career. It was a real challenge keeping a poker face and not reacting to it, but that's what we have to do. So I don't know. That probably is what stuck with me more than anything else, was his cavalier attitude about killing people. But this is the only serial killer that I've actually dealt with. Serial rapist, yes. After this, I was sent to run special investigations, and sex crimes and child abuse units were both under my command. And serial rape was unfortunately more prominent in what we did than it should have been. So I got a lot more experience with them than I did with serial murder. But they always say a serial rapist is only one step away from a serial murderer, and that pretty much every serial murderer used to be a serial rapist. So
you get to kind of at least maybe help kind of stem that before it had a chance to escalate, hopefully. Hopefully, if we can get them out of circulation before they kill somebody, that's a good thing. Yeah, absolutely. Billy Ray, how about you? I know this is kind of your first jump into the true crime genre, but in all the extensive reading that you did, what kind of stuck out for you as making this guy unique in what he was doing?
Yeah, just kind of oddball details, like the fact that he did call in essentially victim number 2, Wendy. When he left her, he was the one who reported the body. You think, why on earth would he do that? And even John Douglas, to cite him again, he said that there are varying reasons why a serial killer will return to a body. Sometimes they're feeling anxious because they don't know if they hid the body well enough. And sometimes they just need to check, did anybody find her yet or find them yet? And for Armstrong, he did not make an effort to hide any of these 5 females. He just disposed of them. And definitely the railroad tracks, he put them right out there where they would be found. So it wasn't about trying to hide the body. It was more about feeling anxiety, like, when is she going to be discovered? And I talked to one particular officer at the Dearborn Heights PD, Mike Petrie, who felt like, because he had done the interrogation, the questioning of Armstrong that I mentioned at the precinct that night at their station. And he said that, well, I just, he felt like this was Armstrong's way of just trying to get ahead of it. Like, I'll pretend I'm the innocent guy. I'll pretend I'm the good Samaritan who discovered this female lying on top of the ice and water in the Rouge River, and I'll be, but he didn't realize it really made him suspect. So just strange little details like that, like, why on earth did he do that? And there was another strange incident about this case where, Dearborn Heights PD had him pegged, and from January January 2nd is when they discovered Wendy, and leading at least a couple months after that, they were following him around. They were watching him very carefully. They got warrants for samples, DNA sample, hair, skin samples, all of that. And so they had an order for him to give hair samples, and he showed up to the hospital the day that he was going to give hair sample, shaven everywhere. They had, they were going to take samples from different areas, not to get too explicit, but he showed up shaven, and there was a registered nurse there who was to take the samples. And that registered nurse testified later in court that, yeah, he showed up that way. He tried to thwart our process essentially, but we still got the sample that we needed. So I don't know, just my impression of him, I've talked to him in person a couple times in prison. I visited him, and the impression of him is still that boy next door. Like, this is a nice guy. He'll sit down, he'll chat with you. He is a very complicated person. I'll just put it that way. He's an extremely complicated person, because I've talked to ladies who worked with him who thought he was just such a sweet boy, almost like they had a motherly instinct toward him. I've talked to people in North Carolina who knew him growing up, a lady from his church who saw him get saved in church. And, there's just so many different aspects to his personality. And you would never think, meeting him, that he had committed these crimes. But yet, like I said, I've listened to that recording in him trying to pretend he's innocent and lying. And we know the DNA evidence that he killed these people. And it's just so hard to reconcile. It really is, if you have had any contact with him in person. And so that is, I think, the most intriguing part. I've done a lot of study of serial killers as part of this. I've been kind of a serial killer fanatic, like consuming all of those different true crime documentaries about different killers. And Richard Ramirez always stands out for me, because if you ever watch the video footage of Richard Ramirez being brought into the courtroom, and there are clips of him making eye contact with the camera, and it's just so disturbing what is communicated through his eyes. There was truly, truly evil there. And it just is emanating from him, coming out of every pore. And he's the other extreme, because Armstrong is just totally different from that as a serial killer. We know he committed these crimes, but there's just no indication of it. And even, talking to the people from Jerry's team who worked the case, one particular officer who took his confessions really got to know him pretty well and got to see the human side of him, and almost became a friend to him. And there's just that dichotomy of he doesn't seem like an evil person. And from my own contact with him, and I even told him this, I honestly don't believe he knows why he killed. I don't think he understands it. I really don't think he understands it. And that's my own conclusion, but there you go.
It's crazy. Well, something that I kind of want to know as well is, in everything that you guys had to, in speaking with him and doing all this research and investigating, how did this affect you guys at the end of the day? What were there aspects about it that for you guys were kind of personal?
For me, sorry, Jerry, I did cut you off.
Go ahead.
It just flew into my head. But for me, I couldn't help but identify with the 5 people who were killed, and even the 5 who were assaulted and survived, because I am about the same age that they would be, the 5 people who were killed. I'm in their generation. And so I identified with them a lot. And that was something that affected me very deeply in doing this research, especially as I was digging and digging and digging and trying to hear more about them and learn more about them, and not getting much traction at first in my research. But I'll tell you too, once I had talked to Jerry and I started the research, and I started looking through the files, and I started digesting even the minute details of the case, it was disturbing for me. I remember some nights in the first few months of all of that, just feeling really out of sorts, because I have never delved into a case like this. And it's almost like it was on me and I couldn't get it off. It's such a strange feeling. I don't even know how to describe it other than I almost had to dig into it and then get used to it. And it was just hanging with me the whole time, because like I said, this is a huge departure from anything else I'd ever researched. And so the horror of the crimes just kind of enveloped me, and I had to adjust to that. And I think, Jerry, that's probably what maybe a cop feels when they're starting out in their job, and they haven't really worked a beat. They haven't shown up to a crime scene yet. And then when they do, it's just like, it's almost like you're in shock and you have to kind of adjust to that and get used to that. Am I right?
Yeah, it's something you can do it or you can't. A lot of people in my career, well, not a lot, but I have known officers in my career that have gotten into police work and then got out of it because it just wasn't something they could deal with. I've known 6 or 7 that ended up taking their own lives because of what they had to see and deal with. The majority of us that stuck it out just learned to internalize, sort of put it in a little box, put it on a shelf, and try not to let it impact your family life, and then deal with it later, much later. It's like I say, I can't really speak to how exactly you do become able to handle it. You just do. I've been to a lot of crime scenes before this, with a lot higher body count. Three corpses was not that prolific. I'd been to homicide scenes with 3 times that many before, but seeing the way that these bodies had been posed and what had obviously taken place after they were killed stuck with me more than anything else. That's kind of what drove me to keep the files, or copy the files and keep them, and drove me to want to write about it, was because this was so unique, even in a city like Detroit, where I mean, we were the murder capital of the world for the majority of my career. This was just so different. And meeting Billy was probably the thing that actually kicked this whole operation into gear and made it all possible, because I could never have done that kind of a job, researching all the victims and giving them the kind of life that she brought to them. All I could do was write about details and write about evidence and write about facts. And I don't know. I guess that's kind of how we deal with it, in our line of work, is we just deal with the details, we deal with the facts, and we kind of take your feelings and put them in a little box on a shelf and think about them later.
Sure. Yeah. Wow. And I think I can, speak for probably a lot of our attendees today, like that. I can't even imagine what that must be like. And so, well, thank you too so much for being willing to share with us, for being willing to do this work and to write the book about this guy. If anyone is interested and would like to purchase the book, you'll be redirected automatically once the window closes. But their publication is called Missing from Michigan Avenue, The Case of John Eric Armstrong. And that's available through our website, Ken Publishing, and you'll be directed thereafter. We do have one final question today that I want to make sure we address. Did Armstrong have any previous arrests or convictions?
No, when they looked into his background, he did not have any police record. In fact, when he lived in Virginia, he had looked into applying with the police, and that just didn't work out for whatever reason. But no, he had a clean background.
And is that's not generally typical for a serial killer, unless I'm mistaken?
Yeah, I think there's a mix. Sometimes they've been on police radar and sometimes they haven't. But yeah, he did not have any kind of record.
So this guy was just an oddball sort of scenario.
He seemed very innocent. Boy next door is what I heard. That was the phrase. The prosecuting attorney, Elizabeth Walker, she said she had shopped at that same store where he worked, and she couldn't believe it. She was flabbergasted. She couldn't believe what she saw in the courtroom. He just looked like this nice guy sitting there.
Well, thank you guys again both so much for your time today. Are there any kind of final sentiments that you would like to leave our attendees with today?
I have always been fascinated by the field of psychology. And so I think in putting this together, it was always on my mind that this is a case study. This is a case study of a human being. This is also a case study of 5 victims and some survivors. And if anybody can read this and learn more about human beings, and I would hope learn more about how someone can cross the line, why someone could cross a line, then I'll be happy if it at all contributes to an understanding in that way.
Absolutely. Jerry, how about you?
Can you repeat the question?
Any kind of final sentiments that you would like to leave our attendees with today? You've gone into like wonderful detail for us and have shared so wonderfully. But
Well, this is I think Billy will get the gist here. This is one of my items in the bucket list. There's a couple others that I'm hoping to get to someday, but it's gonna take. I'm hoping our partnership endures. Let's put it that way.
Detroit has so many stories. Jerry's got a couple more he wants to tell, definitely. But even a lot of the cops I interviewed for this one, they all were like, well, let me put it this way. Several of them were like, I've been wanting to do a book. I got so many stories to tell. I think anybody who's been a Detroit cop has a book in them. I know it.
Oh, anybody that's been a big city cop has got a book in them. I mean, friends of mine from smaller agencies cannot believe that in 31 years, I never learned how to turn on a radar machine. I never had anybody counting the number of tickets I wrote. They counted the number of guns I got off the street every month. They counted the weight of the dope that we brought in. They counted the number of felony arrests that we got with the tracking dogs or whatever. But the big city police function is vastly different in a lot of ways than the average guy that you'll see out there on the street with a radar gun or doing a traffic report, accident report. I couldn't do a traffic crash report if I had to save my life. I mean, I used to do them maybe 2 or 3 years into my career, but when I went to the tactical unit, we didn't do that anymore. We responded to violent crime in progress only. So the big city gives a police officer a different perspective than the average city does as well. So I guess this is all just a function of and what Billy was saying about every time she talked to one of the guys from our department, they all had stories. Well, they will, and if you talk to a New York cop or a Houston cop or an LA cop or a Chicago cop, they're going to have a ton of them too, because they've lived through some of the most exciting, interesting things you could ever imagine.
Well, it's kind of like you were saying earlier, really, right? It's a case study in the human being. And so when you've got a high concentration of people, it's just statistics. There's going to be
Yes,
a higher.
Exactly.
Well, thank you again so much, everyone who attended. Thank you to our wonderful presenters, B.R. Bates and Jerry Cliff. It has been a pleasure. This has been incredibly fascinating. So we will be following up with everyone who registered with the recording of this presentation within the week. And so you can be expecting that in your inbox. But I just want to thank everyone again and have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you.